don't feel like you have to just hit your goals like right at, January 1st. So just give yourself permission to breathe for 2 weeks, pray and plan and listen to the Holy Spirit in those 2 weeks. And it's better to listen and then move forward than to just move forward and realize you missed the boat.
Hey, I'm Andrea Olson. I've been leading worship and training worship leaders for nearly 20 years, and my mission is to support worship leaders just like you in volunteer-supported ministries because I know what it's like. I've been there. It's amazing, but you have a big job, and sometimes you might feel a little bit alone. But I'm here to remind you that you aren't. We'll cover spiritual and leadership growth, practical resources, and get encouragement from other worship leaders from all over the world. I truly want to see you live and lead from the overflow, not the overwhelm. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and join me. Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. Before we get to today's episode, I wanted to share something with you. Did you know that when you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, it actually helps us reach more people? Well, if you didn't, that is the truth. And so we really need your help. And we're actually going to sweeten the deal for you. So here's all you need to do. Head over to Apple Podcasts to our show page and scroll all the way down to the bottom and just leave us a review. Tell us what you like about the Overflow Worship Podcast. And if you do, between now and February 13th, 2023, you will be entered to win our brand new course, the Overflow Worship Leaders Startup Toolkit. It's an online self-paced video course for new or newly positioned worship leaders. And we're going to do a drawing of all the people who leave a review, and one of you are going to win that course. It's a $199 value, so it's a pretty big giveaway. So if you would like to be entered to win that course, all you got to do is leave a review, and we will pick a winner and announce it on our social media at Overflow Worship Official. So make sure that you're following us on Instagram because that's where we're going to announce it, Overflow Worship Official. All right, here we go with today's episode. Thank you so much for being here today. And for everybody tuning in, happy 2023. We're launching into a brand new year and it's exciting. It can be overwhelming and everything in between. But I'm really excited about my guest today because we are going to talk about all of those things. And hopefully you're going to walk away with some really great practical tips and tools to help you personally as a worship leader, but also help your team. So I'm excited to welcome Alex from Worship Ministry Training. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks for having me. And hello, everybody. Glad to be with you guys too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Alex and I met a couple years ago. Alex invited me to be on his podcast, and then we actually chatted again on his podcast in the fall. And I feel like we've had a lot of cool conversations, even off mic, about ministry, about life, about worship. And I think there's a cool alignment for both of our hearts for the small church and just the local church worship ministry. So, Alex, will you tell everybody a little bit about you? Whatever you want to share, just tell our listeners who you are and where God has you today.
For sure. Thanks. And by the way, everybody, Andrea's really smart and you guys are smart for listening to her. So good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So about me, I am a worship pastor, worship leader, all that same stuff as you guys, and serve in a local church here in Los Angeles, California, and also run Worship Ministry Training, which is an online academy for worship leaders, kind of giving you all the practical training and all the tools and resources you need to build a thriving worship ministry. So basically my job is to focus on giving you everything you need so that you can just focus on your team. And so I've been doing that. Well, it's been a podcast for 8 years, but the academy launched in June. And so, yeah, we got courses and, resources and all that stuff. So that's what I do. And then I get to talk to smart, cool people like Andrea often, which is fun too. So I guess I should say I have a family. They're all asleep right now. Wife and 2 girls. I was going to say little girls, but they're 8 and 11, so they're not so little anymore. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it happens fast. They grow fast, don't they?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. We have 3 girls, and yeah, they're just growing like crazy. They are actually currently playing in the snow. I'm guessing that Los Angeles doesn't have any snow.
No, we did just get a bunch of snow on the top of the mountain. I think it's Mount Baldy. And so we're feeling the cold air, but we're not playing in the snow in the streets, unfortunately.
Yeah, got it, got it. Well, we just had a few days of blizzard, and so we've got like, I don't know, 7 to 9 inches of snow here, and so my kids are just like so thrilled. They're sledding, and we may hear a distant woohoo as we're recording here because they're right outside my window.
That's great. Hey, more
Yeah.
power.
Right, right. Well, okay, we are going to dive in here, everybody, and I want to talk about just this New Year thing. There's something that I've been thinking about, and I was emailing with Alex before our chat today about how we go through Christmas season, and it is like busy, right? Every worship leader is like, "Amen. I'm so tired still." From Christmas. But then we jump into January and it's like there's excitement, there's ambition, there's this clean slate, but
Hmm.
we never really get the chance or take the chance rather to catch our breath. And so I would love to chat with you, Alex, a little bit about that today. What are some things that you have put in place because you are a worship pastor? You're doing that day in, day out, full time. So, what are some things that you have put in place that have helped you to insert that pause in your life, not only in the new year, but that's what we're talking about today, but I guess anytime, but really in this new year, since that's where we find ourselves?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to give all the leaders listening permission to take the first week or two of January slow because, by the way, everyone else in the universe is as well. So, like, don't feel like you have to just hit your goals like right at, January 1st. So
Mm-hmm.
just give yourself permission to breathe for 2 weeks, and, pray and plan and listen to the Holy Spirit in those 2 weeks and just yeah, it's better to listen and then move forward than to just move forward and realize you missed the boat. So I would just start with that. In terms of my practices and rhythms, like I've found that learning to pause, and actually, Andrea and I talked about this on my podcast, where she shared a lot about her experience with just being still in the presence of God in the midst of chaos. For me, it's not so much as finding that like secret place or building out this like 1 year, yearly large scale retreat, personal retreat. It's not about that. For me, it's about the rhythms
Mm-hmm.
of like stopping and reflecting and then looking forward to plan. So I've in my own life built, annual rhythms, quarterly rhythms, monthly rhythms, and weekly rhythms of stopping, looking back at what was done, kind of just being still, praying, reflecting, and then planning out the next year, quarter, month, and week. And I can talk about each of those if you'd like, Andrea.
Yeah. So before we do, I would love to talk about them. But before we do, how hard was that for you to start? Because I think it's like oftentimes we quit before we get too far because it's like, well, these rhythms are really like, I'm always interrupted or, whatever. So just encourage our people a little bit with that of how difficult was it to start and then did it get easier?
Yeah. Well, I think like it started for me by beginning to get serious about having a vision for my life because like without really knowing what I wanted, I didn't really have the like passion to make any changes. And so it wasn't until I was like, okay, what do I want for my family? What do I want for my health? What do I want for my church, for my ministry, for my business, whatever? Like when I got clear about those things, it gave me the motivation to actually like plan out my life and cut away all the distractions and all the like neutral things that weren't actually moving me towards the life that I wanted to have. And so that, having that vision, I think is probably pretty key
Mhm.
to wanting to, build rhythms of planning and reflection. And, they say fail to plan, plan to fail.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's true. Like if we don't have a plan, like we're going to wander through the wilderness and not know where we're going. And so for me, these rhythms of, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual, like are really vital to getting anything done that's meaningful for me personally. And everybody's going to have their own vision of what they want to accomplish. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. So let's talk through a little bit about your rhythm. So you have annual, and you're probably thinking about those with New Year and everything. So should we start there with your annual rhythms?
Yeah, totally. So we'll just work through them quickly. It shouldn't take more than 3-4 minutes. But basically, every year at around this time, we're recording in the middle of December of 2022. I kind of just start to think about, what do I want 2023 to look like? What are some of the things that I want to accomplish in 2023? I have a short conversation with my wife over coffee, like, hey, what do you want to look different next year? Or what do you want to do next year? Or what do you want for our family next year? What trips do you want to take next year? And it doesn't have to be this big, profound thing. Like for her, it was like, can we redo the front yard, like with more succulents? And I'm like, okay, that's what you want. Sure. Cool. And for me, I told her, like, one of the things I want as a family is to have more people over to our house after church. We don't really do that often. So that would be something that I'd like to do differently next year. So it doesn't have to be grand or big. It's just start to reflect and take these last 2 weeks of the year to just kind of in the back of your mind, let it, spin around there and percolate and do whatever it needs to do. And then as we get close to the end of the year, what we like to do, and this is just a family tradition that I don't know, happened upon, but we look through our last year's worth of photos on Google Photos because they all get uploaded to Google so Google can spy on us.
Right.
And so anyway, we give them permission to spy on us. But anyway.
We do.
Yeah. So we scroll through the whole year of photos and kind of look at like the fun things that happened or just remember things that we completely forgot about. And I like to write every like major event that happened down in a list. And I don't know, it just kind of like puts a stamp on the year. Like, this is what happened. The year's in the history books, And then, around that same time, that's when I start to map out 2023, like big picture goals, big picture goals for my family, for my business, for my ministry, for my health. And I just write down like 7 to 10 goals on a sheet of paper. And that sheet of paper is kind of like my North Star for the year, right?
Yeah.
And the important thing about that paper is looking back at it regularly so that you're reminded of, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And it might change, and some of them might be higher priority or lesser priority, but like you just have to constantly reference, like, this is what I wanted to accomplish this year. And so each quarter, what that looks like for me is I just basically look at that year's worth of, 7 to 10 goals, and I say, which 2 or 3 do I want to try to accomplish in the next 3 months? In this quarter of the year, which 2 or 3 of my annual goals do I want to put steam behind, put effort behind, right? And I can keep going through the quarterly, the monthly, and the weekly if you want. It should only take a few more minutes, or we can...
Yeah, let's do that. No, that's great.
Yeah. So, and then each month, basically, this is what I do to kind of keep myself focused, is I make a computer wallpaper on canva.com. It's free. And I just put my priorities for the month on that wallpaper, and I put it on my computer. And then every time I open my computer, the first thing I see before I can sign in is like, you're supposed to be doing these things, stupid. Don't get distracted, right?
Yeah.
I do call myself stupid, so don't judge me. But, and then for the month, that's monthly. And then for me, the weekly is probably the biggest game changer. And I would encourage anyone who's listening to start here. If you're like feeling like, oh, this is a lot, I would just say start with this one habit. And that is that every single week on Sunday night, I look back at the week and what I accomplished. And then I plan out my entire week coming up, the upcoming week. Every single day, I write down every single major task that I want to accomplish, any calendar appointments, any sort of additional things that I need to add that are like from my annual goals. I want to make sure that some of the things that I'm doing every week are actually moving me towards my annual goals. So I'll go back and look at that. But just sitting down on Sunday night and planning out your entire week and having a map and a road map and a game plan for your week is like revolutionary. And I started all this by using like Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner. It's like a paper planner. And that's what helped me get into this rhythm. And now I'm kind of moving away from it because there were a lot of pages I didn't use. But anyway, those are kind of the rhythms. And if you think about how much time did that take me, it doesn't take me a ton of time. Like, it's probably a total of like, I don't know, a dozen hours or something in the year. Like, but it radically like gives me direction and purpose every single day that I wake up. And like, I look back and I actually accomplished something. And again, it's not so much about getting away for 2 weeks and having this big once a year thing. It's about these small regular things done consistently that add up over time. And so I would just say, hopefully there's some paradigm shifting there for people, and hopefully that's helpful. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So good. And I think what I hear in there is so much intentionality. Sometimes I think we get lost in the busyness of the dailies, right? It's easy to do. And then we get a month down the road or 2 months down the road and look back and it's like, oh, I'm not achieving any of those big, huge goals that I set in December. But also, then for me, I may remember that, well, I haven't been looking at them every week. And like you said, I haven't, maybe I hadn't been taking an intentional look at my weeks ahead. Like, cause every single day I say this, I feel like more often now than I ever have before, but every single decision we make has a cumulative impact on tomorrow. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I love all of this. I think this is amazing. I'm like a planning nerd. I love planners and like lists and all the things. So I'm just like, yes, let's go. We are going to take a quick pause from today's episode because I have a free gift for you. Leading worship is a big deal. And as much as the responsibility thrills you, it also can be a little daunting, right? And I know because I've been there. As someone who's led worship for more than 20 years, I know how stressful prepping for the weekend set can be because let's face it, Sunday's always coming. So I've developed a checklist that I go through every single time I'm preparing a set list for an upcoming service. And it really helps a lot. I feel confident. I feel prepared. It saves me time because let's face it, whether you're paid or volunteer, you're probably spending precious evening time working because you're just trying to fit it all in. And so this helps you work smart and saves you time. And most importantly, it just helps me make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. It's helped me for 20 years and I'm giving it to you for free. So click the link in the show notes or head on over to overflowworship.com/setlist checklist to get yours today. All right, back to today's episode. But I have a question for you. So one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately and chatting with people about is this whole concept of like being mindful in your yes and confident in your no. And so with this serves as a filter for you, but how does that play out for you day to day, week to week? Because there's always stuff that comes up that needs to be done or is urgent. And so what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. If my boss tells me to do something, it's a yes, right? Because he employs me and God uses him to provide for my family.
Yeah.
If my family needs something, then other things need to get cut. I'm not always great at prioritizing my family, but like if my wife is like, I got to go to the doctor or whatever, it's like, okay, well then I will stay home and I will not go to that meeting. Right. So obviously you have to have certain filters and priorities of things that like you just say yes to.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm pretty brutal about like saying no to things. Like I didn't have an Instagram. Well, I still don't have my own personal Instagram, but I like didn't have social media for years. We don't have a TV in our house. We don't actually have Netflix, but we kind of borrow it from my mom. I think I just confessed a sin. Let's see. I am not great about staying connected to friends. I kind of am like, I get singularly focused on like, this is what I want to do. Right. And so like, I'll go running with friends like once every 6 months, but I love them. They're cool guys, but like, they're not helping me move towards the things that I'm trying to do. And I think because I have a clear picture for what I would like to do, it's easier to say no to things. So I guess your question was, how do we do it practically? One is have a clear vision for what you want and cut out anything that's not moving you towards that. Because anything that's not, there's a great book. I want to say it's Distractions, or I can't remember. I'm sorry. That's like such a lame answer, but basically he says like a distraction is anything that takes away traction, and traction is, pulling you towards your goal. So like anything that's not moving you towards your goal, you got to get rid of it. Because it's not going to help you in the long term. And I think so many people say they don't have time to do everything, but they do. They're just wasting it on social media, to be real. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's super addicting. I had to block YouTube on my computer like 2 weeks ago because I was just like refreshing the homepage looking for something interesting to watch for weeks and weeks and weeks, where I was like, what am I doing? I've probably wasted 2 hours a day on this,
Sure. Yeah.
And so I just like figured out how to block it, and now it's I can't go there. So again, I just think it's having a radical vision of clarity for what you want and then just being brutal with everything else. And I just tell my friends, sorry, I'm focused right now. I love you. I'm in a head down season of moving the ball forward. So I don't know. Maybe I won't have friends when I'm 50, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of wisdom and value in what you're saying, because it's talking about just keeping ourselves focused, right? And keeping our eye on what God has called us to. Mm-hmm. And, we all have blind spots. We all have things we need to be aware of in that. But I think that it's a really valuable thing for us to set the goals and then keep them in mind and stay focused on them. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to your team, right? Like we're talking about worship teams. How do we intentionally set goals for the worship team or with the worship team that are attainable? What does that look like for you with your team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, it's about areas of focus. So like if I look at my team right now and I'm like, okay, I'm assessing where they're at spiritually. I'm assessing where we're at musically. I'm assessing where we're at, relationally and team dynamic and team health and even team size. And I'm saying, what is most needed in this season? Like, where is my area of focus? What does my team need? Mm-hmm. That would be what I would advise all the worship leaders listening is like, look at your team and assess where they're at right now and ask, what do you need to focus on to move them to a better place in that area? So it might be, gosh, we are really like slim after COVID. We need to recruit people. Okay, so your goal for the year is like recruit 8 new good, godly team members, right? And I would say like, don't try to, you can include your team in goal setting, but I think as the leader, it's your job to like figure out what the team needs. It's kind of like Henry Ford said, like if you ask people what they wanted, they would say faster horses. They didn't know that they wanted a car, right? Yeah. And it's like the same thing with our team. Our team doesn't really know. When you ask the people you're serving what they think they need or want, they can give you feedback, but a lot of times you as the leader, like you already know what the team actually needs. Right. They might not even be aware. They might be like, everything's going great. I'm really happy. But you're like, you have that holy discontent because it's not where it should be. Mm-hmm. So I would say as the leader, you need to kind of look at that and assess like, what are the 1 or 2 areas of focus that I need to really spend my energy and time on this year and then rally the team around. And so, yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Yeah, that's so good. I think it's just, I keep hearing that word focus from you, and that is so key for us to be intentional with all the areas of our lives. And I think for me, what I do, and my family will attest to this and my team will attest to this, is I'm focused, but I am a little bit too ambitious with like my goal setting. Like it's a big thing. Or I think, it'll take a year when it really probably would take 3. And so even like paring down the things that we're focusing on, like, for example, you talked about relationally, like you go running with your friends, but you also have to say like, I really need to focus right now. However, you also said you want to have more people over after church in the new year. And so it's like, it's not that it's like, well, we just don't talk to people anymore, like, cause we can't focus on them. No, you're like intentionally choosing what works well for you guys in this season and for your family, and like considering all of the external factors. And I think that that's wise, because when we say yes to everything, then we're really saying no to probably some of the most important people, like our family, who kind of just get whatever's left over. Yeah. And so, yeah, I just think that the word focus is a good one. It's one I keep hearing you say. So then how do you bring your team along in that? Because I think you're right. Like we need to be the one who's setting that vision, right? And the one who's prayerfully going through all of those goals. But how do we help them to feel excited about it too, and to feel like they're along on the journey?
Yeah. Well, can I just share a little bit about what you said about focus, and
Absolutely.
then I'll answer that question.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that somebody told to me recently was, because I said, like I'm juggling so many areas, and he said this analogy that really to me resonated, and it was like our life is like a stove burner. Like there are four Bunsen burners. Is that what they're called? Not a Bunsen burner, but there are.
Four burners. Yeah.
Yeah. And and like you can only really have four things cooking at once. Well, right? If you have too many things, you're going to burn one of them. You're going to like the thing in the oven's going to like, catch on fire or whatever. It's like we really can only like manage, maintain, or improve four major areas in our lives. And so I would really, kind of what you were sharing, like sometimes we're overly ambitious. Like don't go crazy, everybody. Like don't try to conquer, the world in 1 year, or don't try to land a rocket on Mars in 1 year. Like it's, Elon Musk is taking decades to get there. Right. And so it's just like having that long-term plan and realizing like you can't do it all at once. So what's the next right step that you should take? Right. And I think even that is an important question of like, what is the next right step for you to take? Because there are about 1,000 steps that you could take, but what is the next most important step? And certain things, if we do these things first, it makes everything else after it easier. So like, what is the one thing that if you did it first, it would make all the other things easier next, and then do that again and again and again and again. And pretty soon how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
Yes.
And so don't try to conquer the world all at once. Like it's just, you can only manage 4 areas of your life. Like pick the priorities in each of the 4 areas, do the thing, move it past you, start the next thing, move it past you. And then in a decade, you'll look back and you'll have like the healthiest team in the world, right?
Yes.
It's a long game. It's a long play. And, there are no great teams built overnight. It's literally like doing the right thing day after day, week after week, year after year, and your team gets healthier and you have, better musicality and whatever it is, the focus area. Like so here's the thing. Once you hit the musicality thing, you're like, wow, we sound amazing. Cool. Okay, well, what's the next thing then? Is it songwriting or is it relationships? And it's like, just focus on 1 or 2 things per year and you won't feel overwhelmed, and you'll actually get it accomplished. Because if you go 18 different directions, you actually go nowhere. But if you just like point at one thing and actually move towards it, you make a lot of progress. So sorry, now what was your question again?
No, that was so good. And actually I have to say, you talked about, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right.
I grew up, my dad used to say that all the time.
Yeah.
And anytime I say that, people look at me like I'm weird, like they've never heard that before. So I'm really glad to meet somebody else who like uses that quote.
Yes, I love that quote.
Yeah. Okay. So my question was, with our focused goals, our 1 or 2 things, how do we intentionally bring our teams along with us on the journey, helping them feel excited about it too?
Yeah. Well, first of all, like you have to communicate it. So like if you just have the goal in your head, you can't expect to take anyone along with you, right? So you have to like share it, whether it's in an email or a little video you make, or you have a team meeting and you say, hey guys. And I always encourage worship leaders, like every January, you should have an annual team meeting, like, or February or whatever, but like pretty close to the start of the year, be like, hey guys, here's our focus for the year. Here's why. And you always, Andrea, like you always have to say why something matters, because if they don't know why it matters, they won't care to do it.
Yeah.
There has to be a reason in their mind where they're like, okay, that's cool. And they might not agree with the what, but they can agree with the why. And so they'll do the what. So, I would just say have a meeting and communicate it and communicate the why. And then in order to keep the team moving towards it, just like we need to make our goals visible, we need to also keep those goals visible for our team. And whether that means, you put it on a whiteboard in your worship room area or your backstage area, whether it means you just talk about it constantly, whether it means you send a monthly email or you send progress reports, or like, let's say the goal is relational connection. So you have 12 things at your house this year. And, every time you gather, you say, hey guys, the reason we're doing this is because this year relational connection is so important for us and we want to grow in it. And you just keep telling them. And that's the thing about being a leader is you just have to keep saying it over and over and over.
Yes, yes. And sometimes it gets a little tiring, even for us as the leader, to keep saying it, but it's so important. Just like we need it on our laptops when we open it up in the morning, right?
Yes. Yeah.
To be reminded of for ourselves. Well, Alex, this has been so helpful and so good. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you would like to share with our listeners today?
I'm looking at some of the notes I jotted down, and I think one thing that comes to mind that I think it must be said is, if God is not in something, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you will not accomplish it. Man makes his plans, but the Lord directs his steps, right?
Yeah.
We still have to step. We still have to take steps. We are responsible. We can't just sit there and be like, dear God, do it all, right? It's like we take steps and he directs our steps, and he gives success. And so, yeah, I think just knowing that we can work ourselves till we're blue in the face, but like if God's not in it, it won't happen. And just being fully reliant on him, and like not being prideful and thinking that, because I know a lot of the things I said made it sound like, if you want it, you can achieve it. And like there is a certain amount of truth to that, but not ultimate truth, which is like God is sovereign and he will bring to pass the things he wants to bring to pass. But you and I are responsible to do our part in partnering with God to bring out into fruition the things that he's called us to do. So yeah, I think that would probably be my last comment so far.
That's really good. That's so good. Well, Alex, where can people learn more about you and about worship ministry training?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to all the listeners for giving time to this today. It's really important. Worshipministrytraining.com is the home base. That's where you can find out about the academy. You can try it for $1 for 15 days, full access. On the social media stuff, it's Worship Ministry Training pretty much everywhere except for Twitter, because Twitter is weird. And anyway, just go to worshipministrytraining.com and you'll find all the links for everything.
Amazing. Sounds good. Well, everybody, will put all of that in the show notes as well, so it's just a click away. Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time and energy to really bless our people today. I'm really grateful.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, that wraps up another episode of the Overflow Worship Podcast. Until next time, be blessed. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Overflow Worship Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit subscribe so you never miss another one. And we would be so grateful if you would leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Tell us what you love about the podcast, because your reviews truly do help us reach more people. And don't forget, we have a free gift for you. My checklist for planning a successful set list every single time is yours for free. Just visit overflowworship.com/setlist checklist. Once again, thank you so much for listening.